You're here for season 7 of the Whole Horse Podcast, now at 110 episodes and counting. I'm your host, Alexa Linton, coming to you from Vancouver Island in Canada. I can't wait to continue to share thought-provoking, edge-pushing, geeky, and often challenging conversations with horse professionals from all areas of our industry who are working to make horses' lives better. This season, you can look forward to more on the specifics of creating enriching, healthy horse spaces, an area I'm particularly passionate about. I'm so excited that you're here listening in, meeting great horsey humans, and hopefully learning a new thing or two about horses and yourself. Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. We're here for the Whole Horse Podcast. We're still in season 7. I think this has been our most epic season yet. I don't know about you, but I've just been loving all the humans coming on, sharing about their work with horses and their journey with horses. And this episode is no exception. I can't wait to maybe introduce you to and share with you the wisdom of Lori Halliday. Thank you for being here, Lori.
So excited to be here. Thank you, Alexa.
Oh, it's just a pleasure. It's just a pleasure. I had the honor of meeting Lori in person at the Lockie Phillips Clinic in Washington. That was in May, I guess now, which is amazing. Yeah. Time is flying. And there's just something about you, Lori. I gotta say.
I was so glad to see you too. It's interesting when you can kind of fall in love with your people online or from a distance, and then when they're really right there around you, I kind of felt a little shy, honestly. There were a lot of generous and important partners at that one event. We were
Yeah.
in a flock there. It felt really like a privilege.
It sure did. It sure did. And it took me a minute to kind of put the pieces together, but I remember thinking, who is this woman? And then it all fell into place. I was like, oh, I got it. And I was so moved by some of the work that you did in the clinic and just then going back and diving into podcast with Lucky and your work and your sharing and having you here on the podcast feels like, yeah, important work here today. So I would love it, Lori, if you shared a little bit about your journey with horses, where it finds you in this moment. And I know that's a huge question, but just wanting to kind of give the people who may not have heard of you and your work a little understanding.
Thank you. And thanks so much for listening to that podcast with Lockie. That has become well known in my household as Lori's Tell All podcast. And I say that because when it emerged and he shared it with me, I literally had like a Sopranos reaction, a Godfather reaction. And I said, I'm going to have to bury this. I'm going to have to bury this. And I think I had spent so many decades of keeping my mouth shut. And which speaks to kind of where I was in the horse world. I, at 30, ended up here at the ranch, and Ella was small. She fell in love with horses. So I pretty quickly realized, holy, you know what, I'm going to have to probably be in charge of a horse. What does this even mean? I had played around with horses as a kid, but I certainly had no idea how to live with and be responsible for horses, much less a herd. So I started studying alongside her, and we kind of found our way in and out of different worlds, which led her, as many people in the industry end up as hunter jumpers.
Oh, yeah.
And as English in the saddle, hunting or jumping with or without their shirts buttoned up, depending on what they're doing. And so we were highly exposed to all of those experiences, while simultaneously myself, I was following more along the thread of what at the time was the kindest, most gentle horsemanship, this big overarching arm called natural horsemanship. And of course, as humans have a way of doing, we learned to bastardize the word natural. And wow, it looks a lot of different ways, and people interpreted it a lot of different ways. So while we were both immersed in the horse world, we were kind of in slightly opposing camps
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
for a long time. But in fact, over time, Ella ended up deciding that what was being asked of her and what was being asked of the horses in that world didn't sit well with her spirit, with her heart. And when she realized it and when it really became clear to her, she literally hung a left, took the horses, took all of her stuff, and never looked back. So
Wow.
it was a total mystery and delight to me that we would end up, our roads would come converging later in life. I did not foresee that. And so it's been really one of the biggest blessings of my life to get to share this passion that we entered into together, me at 30 something and her at 2.
Yeah.
um, yeah, that we really entered at the same time. And so I have this absolute peer in my partner and my daughter. And for us now, the work that we have distilled over time together through many, many dogged hours of all kinds of different horsemanship and privileged study with lots of different wonderful influencers of our time, old and young, men and women. Um, None actually people of color. I've been thinking about that.
Yeah.
But for us, what it's really about is consent and developing intuition. Because it's one thing to develop tools and modes, but it's another thing to develop your own leadership and your own listening to yourself and to practice trusting your gut and seeing what happens. And that's how we develop relationship and intuition. And once we have the kind of self focus, self congruency, self relationship, self leadership, then understanding what consent is when my body really is saying yes, or when my horse partner or my family partner is really in agreement with me, I start to trust my sense and my feeling of what that really is when we're in agreement. And so those have really become the foundational pillars for the work that we do. While, yes, it is natural, we choose to call it intuitive horsemanship because that is the focus. It's on developing leadership. We've got all kinds of tools. We'll be pulling out all kinds of tools, but it's what I know just from my experience now over the last decades living with horses is that what you really need in any moment is to be able to trust yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then your horse can trust you. And so that's kind of at the base of what we really want to offer and share with people. We find that once humans and animals have developed their own self sovereignty, that they love, trust, and know themselves and can count on themselves, that the partnerships can be more clear and more effective and more consensual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was long winded.
Oh, no, I love it. I love it. There's so many questions in there. I have this curiosity recently, and this kind of comes at the intersection of, we've just seen the suspension of a rider in the Olympics. So this was probably coming out. Anybody listening is like, that was a long time ago. But it is actually when we were recording pretty recent. We've seen a lot of these shifts. And I've been in this place, Lori, of really feeling into this truth of, how do we say it? We don't know what we don't know. It's that place of like, until something starts to kind of emerge and start to open up and we start to see the edge of something or the bridge to somewhere else, we always look back and go, why didn't I figure that out? Like, what was I missing? And yet here we are on this journey where things are opening up as we go. And I wonder for you, this this sense of intuition, this sense of congruency, even meaning that matching of the inside and the out in a very, very broad sense. How does that relate to this sort of, one, being gentle with yourself through these openings, these emerging spaces, but just also trusting that I will learn what I need to learn when I kind of find my way there. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, and I think interestingly, even though this event is happening in the Olympics right now, because it's happening contemporarily at this moment, we're at the end of having this conversation at the end of July, 2024. And so even though by the time this airs, that will have been old news,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's going to be old news. I think that this particular story, as many landmark stories are, will represent a time and an ethos where an old guard and an old way has really once again come into question, but in such a visible and public way. Like, right, the Olympics won't happen again for a long time. And so this will just kind of be floating here for us to look at. And I have to tell you, I feel kind of ambivalent about it
Uh-huh.
because I know a lot of our close cohorts who I love and respect have been very public about, maybe even you spoke about it,
Yep.
have been very public about kind of what they are thinking around this topic. And I think the sort of midline that people are trying to take is, yes, an individual did this. However, shouldn't we actually be looking at the whole industry and the whole culture and ethos that taught her that? And so I find this a little sticky, frankly,
Yeah.
because why, yes, absolutely. Intellectually, we can say that this woman did not manifest this mindset. But I refuse to take the specter off of this individual who perpetrated this abusive crime.
Mm-hmm.
So, sure, she came from an abusive world and probably an abusive family, and God bless her. A lot of us have experienced abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel a little edgy about it, frankly. I think there's a way to look at what happens in the industry, there's a way to look at what happens in our culture without having to put some kind of individual forgiveness on the individuals who are perpetrating the crime.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can be grown up about it and say that is absolutely wrong. And so is the world that it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it has to have a big, soft, cushy place for this individual to fall.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that would actually serve her. This may be from my own perspective of otherness as a brown bodied, brown representing woman.
Mm-hmm.
I may have less forgiveness, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, I can understand wanting to take the arrow away from her and put it on the bigger problem. But why don't we just have the focus and the multiple focus, the multiplicity of focus of noticing that it's all really inappropriate?
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, oh, we're going down the wrong road if we notice what she's doing. No, it's the right road. We
It's
should
like
be noticing what she's doing in order for us to illuminate and clarify what we're looking at. I don't think it hurts for us to have a response to what she's doing. I'm not saying or in any way validating that people should do crimes against another human or animals over it, but this sort of softening that we're having for the
mm-hmm.
act, I'm finding frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. It's been an interesting one for me, and I'll share it here. I mean, I was in the hunter jumper world, and I was, that horse crazy kid. I grew up essentially my one of my first riding instructors was looking back. Yeah, like you said, very inappropriate, very violent, and towards horses, not towards me in terms of physical violence. But there was a learned response from me that has taken me a long time to unpack. And even saying that, oh, the guilt and shame is like, whoa, like just this sense of, oh my God, some of the things that I learned.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
you know,
I appreciate you digging that gross thing out and just
oh,
feeling it for a minute. To me, that is honorable and that makes me feel connected to you. When
hmm,
you say I'm connected to it, then I feel more connected to you.
yeah,
We take someone who's immersed in it and we say they're somehow not connected to it. I find that that's felonious. Like that's inaccurate.
yeah, yeah.
She
And
she was not without choice.
yeah,
She was
yeah.
very privileged.
Incredibly
actually.
privileged. Yes. And it's definitely, I mean, you know, I made, so I have my whole horse apprenticeship program coming up. And
Mhm.
it may have started when this podcast comes out.
Right.
But it's interesting. Every year I do an altar. I make an altar
Mm.
as a way of sort of calling in, but also of connecting to, yeah, the work, connecting to my ancestors, connecting to
Mm.
what has come before that has made this possible and what is necessary now. And it was
Mm.
interesting because I found this jewelry box, and this jewelry box had my, gosh, I'm so emotional today. I had a somatic experiencing session right before this around
Mm.
connection. So I'm like a little raw, which I don't think is the
And
worst
you
place to be in this conversation.
I think we together are pretty, we're feelers.
We're feelers.
So
We're
I
feelers.
love it and I encourage it. And I'm gonna probably cry next. So go
Oh,
ahead.
good. Yeah. Join me.
Yes.
So I
Mm.
found this jewelry box, and in it was my Pirelli level 1 pin
Hmm.
that I got when I achieved in quotation marks
Yes.
these standards for this first level of natural, this type of natural horsemanship. And
Me too.
whew, and I saw it and I was like,
Mm.
okay, because I've been really battling with this place, this sadness around erasure lately.
Mm.
And I say this globally, and I also say this very in the microcosm. So, like, both in my life, but also looking at the world of like, are we not remembering our history?
Hmm.
And also down at the microcosm of seeing how easy it is to erase where we've come from and what the truth of
Hmm.
our history it actually is. And so I put that pin on my altar, and I did it as a way of reminding myself of that history. And not to say that that didn't come with some gifts, but there was definitely a lot of other things that came with that pin. Ways that I treated my horse or myself that I'm not proud of at this time.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I put that there because that program is about, for me, being a bridge and
Hmm.
remembering both where we came from, but that we can also change and we
Right.
can move into something different
Hmm. Hmm.
with the right supports, with the right, you know?
Right. And that we actually are mature enough to embrace the inherent paradoxical nature of things now. We are mature enough now to
Yeah.
realize the things that were so messed up, the most horrific things that occurred often had a shard of light almost immediately shining through. And now we're mature enough to recognize that we actually learned and healed and we rise up out of adversity, in fact. And it's interesting that you brought this up because it's a lot what Laki was musing with me while I was visiting him in Spain, which was such a privilege, by the way. I had never
Oh,
been. Some of my ancestors are from Spain, and it was a surprise birthday gift from my husband. He planned it without me.
what?
I was like,
I
"What?" I
had
was like, "You called Laki?"
no idea.
Anyway, so and they were just everybody was so generous about it. So it was so lovely. But we were in this conversation around I like that you called it erasure, which to me is sort of borderline then with emergence. And Lockie's now talking a little bit with the Olympic thing about cancel culture.
Yeah.
And what I noticed with him is he sort of flipped his training process upside down to take another look while I was there. And he's going to talk more about this in the upcoming Homecoming 2.0. But just this idea of really what you're saying is what about what I used to do? What about what I used to know? What about what got me here? And is there nothing of that that is still true? Or is there anything of that that still serves me? And is there any of that that is also the language of my horse still?
Yes.
And and what I wanted to say about the Pirelli method, which I also had the privilege to study very closely with, got to go to Pagosa Springs and do all kinds of fun things with them. A lot of those different people, Buck Brannaman and
Yeah.
Jonathan Field,
Yeah.
and more recently Carolyn Resnick, and so who who is kind of in her words, more of the foundation. She believes that she came before them, that she's actually the foundation of natural horsemanship. So, but what I ended up begging the question of, which I'm still to this day, 25 years later, begging the question of, is every time I would be with them, I would think, but how much force is necessary now? But how much force is necessary now? And so that question has been my compass
Oh,
now from the very beginning. And I'm so grateful
yeah.
that I had an inner, curious, question everything compass that wondered with every single one of those phenomenal teachers of their time, but how much force is necessary now? Because if we go to the golden rule and the story would be about me as a student, I can tell you what, I'm the student who did not need a lot of force or pressure. If you gave me a certain look, I knew I was wrong. Like there's some dogs
Yeah.
and horses like that.
Oh,
Like there's
yeah.
no need to try to do anything in any way that would be a repercussion because they already know that they're wrong and bad and did the wrong thing. And you don't want to break their spirit. And so for me, I always had that question. And I would watch them and think, they are now in a place where they're using more force and more pressure than what I think is necessary now.
Yeah.
And so then they became and to my to me, they started to become looking dull. I felt that their sensitivity was dull, that their timing was dull. And in fact, there was a woman who came and watched the training that Lockie did here a few years ago. And I bravely brought my Mustang into the training, who I had never trained with, because I wasn't there for my ego. I was
Yeah.
there for the moment of the brilliance to have Laki see my new partner and help me understand something that I might not see. And then afterwards, another another horse professional who was there I said, what did you think about Oso? Because she knew that I had adopted him from a rescue as a wild Mustang. And she said, your timing was a little slow. It's like, it's kind of what you don't want to hear. Like, you want to hear somebody say, your timing was right on beat or whatever. And I let that kind of work me for a while. This
Yeah.
back from the public, like, you're the leader here. And you know what? Your timing is a little slow. Well, 2 years later of my life of chewing on that, I've decided that she's right. I am slow. I go slow. And I'm not here to push and force and try to replicate someone else's timing. Because within my system is the question, how much force is necessary now? And that might make my timing look slow to somebody who chooses more force sooner.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't really a reflection of me, as most commentary are not. They're often a commentary that's based on the person who's giving the feedback. And so it still comes down to the question, what of our powerful brute force and tactics and tools are we going to pull out? Or do we have 60 more seconds to wait and see if maybe something else is coming, for instance?
Yeah.
Make somebody think you're slow. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and that I who knows better and who had this burgeoning new relationship felt so hurt and offended by that. I felt like it was a bad report card. And it took me 2 years to get my head on straight and say, oh, right, of course I look slow to her.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. And those things that kind of eat away at us, right? Just like
especially from kind of our colleagues.
totally,
Such an in.
totally. Ooh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And I love that it kind of came back around and was like, oh yeah. Right. That is
I have
how
a
I
t-shirt
am.
that says that. That is correct.
Totally. Thank you.
And hashtag thank you. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Such
it's tender. It's tender. I'm not in
it
any way
is.
taking away the tenderness. I'm agreeing that these are tender, murky waters that we emerge from.
They sure are. And I don't think, I think that as humans, we have this tendency to look for this is the clear path. This
Mm,
is the clear way. If you take this path, you're grand, you're golden. And
mhm.
And I come back to your sentiment at the beginning that it's about intuition. It's about listening. It's about knowing ourselves to the point where we can arrive at a place of trusting ourselves.
Mm.
And that doesn't have a clear go take these steps and you'll get to this.
Especially for people who are different,
Yeah.
who are, for instance, neurodivergent,
Yes.
right? Or have whatever, walking with whatever kind of otherness. I mean, we really need to get it and embrace we're likely to do it differently. We are likely to do it differently.
Say it again for the people in the back.
Oh, I mean, it gives me goosebumps. It's so hard to trust that in a culture where we're being asked to do things in a very certain way. One of my favorite things, not to keep talking about the Pirellis, but one of my favorite things that they would joke about, Linda would joke about this, is like, oh yeah, definitely do all the things, do all the phases, do all the things you know, and if that doesn't work, do the opposite. And I just loved that so much. That brought me so much joy and humor into my horsemanship so I could get off of it. And I realized whenever the would hit the fan with me, often on board when I was younger, I would notice that my attitude was to kind of laugh a little bit like, whoa, what is that? To bring a little bit of like an uptick and a serotonin and a curiosity instead of a down click and a clamping down,
Yeah.
because we lose our executive functioning down there. We're not thinking straight anymore. And so, how to both have enough focus and intention, but probably more parts needing a little levity. And as you pointed to, a slowing down enough to listen and hear one's self, because we're
Yes.
there, right? We're in there, even during, like when you said in your early times with a teacher. And by the way, we had trainers in the hunter jumper world who were brutal with the horses, and they were so hard on Ella.
Oh
They were
God,
so
yeah.
hard on her, and she was amazing and devoted, like a star. Like I don't know how they. I mean, probably it was just some kind of regular female competition, but it's just not our way, and so we still don't even know how to deal with that, but just again to like difference and specifically to neurodivergence, I feel that my father was undiagnosed Asperger's,
Yeah, mine
and
too.
how I know is because then I would go on to do all the studies and work in the field. And so
Yep.
I've had 20 years here at the ranch working with neurodivergent youth and adults who all remind me so much of my dad. And I have a lot of interesting tendencies myself. And what I've noticed, and you said something earlier about this, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's a thing. What I've noticed about the horses is that their level of sensitivity and their level of hypervigilance in the field, in the relational field, is how I feel.
Yep.
I mostly identify that as HSP, highly sensitive person, and there's many other aspects that are often comorbidity or coupled with
Mhm.
that diagnosis. But I have noticed and felt that as an adult growing up here with the horses, I felt so much more at ease with them than
Yeah.
people. And I have felt that my sensitivity matches their sensitivity, and that their sensitivity matches my sensitivity, and so that I can relate with them and trust them, and even things I don't want to pay attention to. You probably relate to this too. Like in the airport or whatever, my husband like pulls off his sound muffle things, and he's like, "How are you?" And I'm like, "The woman, 2 rows ahead vomited, the person to the left vomited, and 2 rows behind us on the right, they've all vomited."
Yep.
He's like, "What are you talking about?" I mean, I'm just paying attention to everything in the field. You too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I had this reflection from someone a couple of weeks ago. He said this thing that just got me so hard because as I shared before we came on, especially since my health event 2 years, 2 and a bit years ago, my masking has really fallen away.
Mm-hmm.
And the neurodivergence has really come, front and center as far as like, oh, yeah, I'm not diagnosed, but I definitely am on the spectrum and I definitely have ADD tendencies. And it's also caused me to kind of look around at my world and the people in my programs and my friends and be like, ah, interesting. And
Yes.
this fellow said to me, he goes, yeah, so neurotypicals tend to have this relationship to their inner field, to their insides, to their body,
Mhm.
whereas neurodivergent people tend to have a relationship with the field, the broader field,
Right.
externalized attention,
Mhm.
hypervigilance when it's not, you know, worked with and, yeah, when we have to be. And that hit me so hard. I was like, it was one of those, well, crap. Yeah, of course. Like, how did I not see that? Once again, you don't know until you know.
It's almost like the thing with my husband, right? It's like
Yeah,
he has his headphones on
he's,
and it just allows him to kind of separate from everything. And he's kind of like that even without those headphones on.
yeah,
And I can still hear everything even with those headphones.
even with the noise canceling.
Yeah, I know. But so it's like, when I was studying about the highly sensitive people, HSP, and there's a great movie out right now called Sensitive. Did I talk
Okay.
about that one? And Alanis
Oh,
Morissette is in it as their kind of poster child for HSP, and her son, Ever, also HSP. And one of the favorite facts that I derived from that film that sort of settled my system, because every time we look at how to diagnose or identify something in us, in one of us humans or horses or dogs, I think it's scary, right? Because the way that the world has managed mental health, mental wellness, mental illness until very recent times, and maybe even now, has really been hush hush and is meant to be, swept under the rug and not talked about. Even though mental illness is in every single family, it's still treated that way. And in the film, when they were talking about the highly sensitive people, this fact really stuck with me, and I think you're going to love this. 20% of all species on the planet have the HSPs. So
yeah.
it's not a defect, it's not a brokenness. It is something through all of evolution that has carried forward and exists in all species. And so, in fact, it's more like not a hypersensitivity, but a super
Yeah. I was
sensitivity.
going to say superpower.
That's right. It's a
Yeah.
superpower. And they have found that leaders like you, Alexa, who are HSP, like me,
Yeah.
like Lockheed, have a way of creating cultures that can sustain, cultures that can live, because the HSP leader is concerned about the ethos and the culture.
Yep.
And so people tend to stay in those positions and with those jobs and in those clubs because there's care for the culture. And that's that kind of broader perspective, right? That's looking out into the ring more than into that more central focus. So probably our work, you and me, Alexa, is probably that we could spend more time and more focus on ourselves.
Completely. Because that's what tends to get missed, right?
Right.
Yeah.
If all of our attention's out there, yeah.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. I've been finding it. I mean, my body has taken me on a heck of a journey in the last couple of years.
Mhm.
And it had to. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't slowed down,
Mm-mm.
um, ratcheted down in the way that I needed to.
Mm.
Um, because
Oh,
the
makes me
drive
go.
the drive to achieve was just out of this world. And I think, I look back, oh gosh, I'm having shivers right now. So I look back and I think of I had said for years, I want to change the horse industry. When I die, I want to know that I had a hand in horses living better lives around the world. That was that was my thing. That was my drive. That's what I want. and wanted,
Mm-hmm.
but it was from a place of I will sacrifice myself on this altar to do that. I will sacrifice my body and my wellness to do that because
Isn't
I
that weird?
feel
Isn't
right.
aren't you a little bit like, I can't believe that I agreed to that? And
Yeah,
the way that you're saying it to me is telling me that you literally had those words inside of you. You literally, some part of you inside of you agreed and made a pact
that
with
this is
some
what we're doing.
universe that I'm going for this. And I will go to the ends, even if it takes my body down, I will go.
Yep,
And we have to be vigilant about those agreements. Um,
totally.
I talked to a good friend recently who would use that same kind of verbiage. I said, "Do you remember way back when you said, I'm here for the cause, and I'll be like the water at the shore, and you can throw me down on the rocks at the shore." And I was like,
Wow.
you're not doing that, right? I mean, we don't need to talk about that, right? He's like, no, no, no. I realized, no, you can't do that. You cannot sacrifice your body. But I just think it's interesting that you like even had the words as they were
Yep.
coming out. I felt like you had agreed to that.
Yeah, like a karmic thing.
Yeah.
It felt so strong in me. And I honestly don't know if there would have been anything that would have stopped me until I literally almost died,
Yeah.
and had to, it's like a runaway horse that
Mm,
finally there's a wall or a something, right? And I look back at that and I think, what motivates that? What drives that? I think part of it is with the neurodivergence, my focus on the field, my
mm,
focus on reducing suffering, my focus on changing what's outside of me so I feel better. I feel because I'm not finding harmony in myself, in my being.
mm,
I need to change. I need to do whatever I can to change
mhm.
what's happening outside of me.
Right. The system out here hurts me. And
Yeah.
and so I'm gonna make the changes. And I've had those same
Ooh,
feelings as a youth too, well, I'm privileged enough, I'm wealthy enough, I'm educated enough, I get the grades, I have the privilege, I'm gonna have to go and like fight crime.
change the
I'm
world.
I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to change the world. And then me running into things in the world like, ooh, I don't know if I'm actually made for the criminal part of law. Like, I don't know if I'm meant to hear about rape and homicide of children and women all day long. Like, I don't know if my system can run that through.
Yeah.
And so it's a razor's edge actually to
Whoa.
have the will and the capacity of a superhero, but then find out that your superhero strength is the sensitivity.
Yeah.
So it's like, ooh, I'm like, I pull open my superhero cape and I'm like a little banana slug. I'm like, ooh, I'm kind of gooey in here. Um,
Like you said before the podcast, your body's probably you're not, if you were a horse, you wouldn't be a competitor or
right. I
something
was
like
like,
that.
yeah, I was like, I think Alexa, you're just going to be more of the kind of horse who lives at the ranch now, not the one who has to put on the things and jump, jump, jump. And you're still a valid horse. You're still the gorgeous mare, the lead mare. Everybody's still loving and counting on you. You don't have to jump. You don't have to do that anymore. And that's really what we're saying to the horses. So now we have to say it to ourselves. The same thing
Yes.
I said to Lockie when I was with him. I said, you got to slow down. He said, I know, you told me already. I got to slow down. Other people are telling me to slow down. And I finally said, you know what? You would never treat your horses this way.
Ooh,
He's like, ooh, yeah.
a good one.
Yeah. And so that's what we get to do. Like the care and the focus and the sort of overcare that we sometimes do with our horses, we've got to turn that fire hose back on ourselves. Um,
Oh yeah.
for rest, for restoration, for just enough space to have our own thinking so that we don't get trapped in comparison, which is the thief of joy. That was a big learning I had actually while I was with Lucky, was like, wow, I have made up. I'm always amazed when I do really kooky stuff, but I also had made up all kinds of comparisons in the field about what I thought other people were doing compared to what I was doing. And I'm constantly having to dismantle those because no one is making up those stories except for me.
Yeah.
I'm making up those stories. I'm making the comparisons. I'm making all the rules. And so, just like spring cleaning, now and then I have to kind of go through there and say, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. No
Yeah.
one's setting those standards. Those are standards that you came up with in your mind. And to sort of check myself before I wreck myself, because I'm doing it now. I'm doing a creative writing project, and I kept setting all these thresholds that I couldn't nail. And so I felt constantly disappointed with myself. But I had made all of the thresholds myself.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like chasing my own tail, like causing myself grief, you know?
Oh, I know so well.
I
I
know.
always know I need a break when I watch my cat with envy. Do you know what I'm saying? I just
Yeah,
like
they're
watch
on.
her nap and I'm like, damn, that was good.
Yeah.
Why can't I be a cat just napping in the garden? Like,
Mm,
and then I'm like, I think you maybe need a break.
yes. It's like the deep wisdom within when we see the regulation outside and we're like, ooh, there's regulation out there.
Yeah.
Thank God, right? For our animals, for our partners, that
Thank
they can show
God.
us these different wavelengths in a living partners and have us beg the question of like, ooh, I'm far away from that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give us perspective on,
Mm-hmm.
okay, time to round back around to that space of settling. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And trusting again in the process. That's been one for me. I really found, and maybe people listening can relate, like, and you can relate, Lori, is like after my illness, it's been a climb to find my trust again in my body in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and maybe that's just a part of what happens when things feel like they really go sideways, you know?
Mm-hmm. It's actually a big awakening. It's a big graduation. It's an initiation. And we're meant, the body, the intelligence, the epigenetics of the body is meant to not go back into danger and to not go back into danger quickly. I'm thinking about years ago when I was in a tricky situation and did the thing we all don't want to do and inevitably did, and flew off of a horse onto a very hard road
Ooh.
and laid there thinking, okay, is my pelvis broken? Like what am I feeling in my body? And when I slowly healed from that and recovered from that, I had also had an abdominal surgery. You and I talked about that you have had abdominal surgeries, and they really take such a long time to heal
Oh
from.
gosh. Yeah.
I have had a few as well. I know you have too. And so then just taking my body onto the mounting block or onto the fence and just laying my stomach where I had those abdominal sutures onto the back of the horse who I blew off of. Just took such a long time of doing that over and over and
Wow.
over. I thought, wow, I'm never going to get on here the way I used to. I thought, this is going to stay with me forever. It felt like such a deep learning and
Right.
such an ingrained fear. The truth is, I did get over it. And now I'm just stupid again. And now, now I've lost my sense again. And now I hop up on there like a kid. But I just want us to not miss the beauty and the intelligence and the teaching of the scared body,
Aha.
right? The
Yeah.
the the uneasy body, the body who still doesn't have the vestibular, balance yet, or the body weight. I know you lost a lot of weight when you weren't well. Whatever it is that makes the body feel grounded again, that whatever it is that, and we're just not quite there,
Yeah.
that we be generous enough with ourselves and that we listen and we say, oh, wow, I'm scared. I was just talking to Lockheed that I tell my students all the time. So as you climb up on the mounting block, do you feel your heart racing? And sometimes they're like, no, nope, I feel good. I'm like, really? Seems like maybe. Do you maybe have an elevated heart rate? And everybody wants to say, no, I'm not
I'm
scared. I'm
fine.
not
I'm totally fine.
afraid.
Yeah.
I want to get on and I would like a picture on the horse without a helmet for Instagram. Like, it's like they have a
Right.
focus. But the truth is, I'm 55, as I mentioned, and every time I get on that mounting block, whether I'm going to ride or not, I get an elevated heart rate.
Yep. Me
And
too.
I just get up there and mess around. I'm not even trying to do anything too tricky, but I'm aware enough of my body and I'm listening enough to my animal body. And I'm telling the truth as I know it at the moment. And I'm not ashamed.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm just inviting other people, like, mine always races when I'm up there. It's okay. Like, just wondering how you're feeling. And then they can, like, take a breath and be like, oh, well, actually, my heart is racing. Oh, I do
Yeah.
feel kind of dizzy. Let me just breathe here for a moment. And through that acknowledging and that becoming aligned again with self and that truth telling and that sort of bringing down the facade, the baloney, peeling down the mask and being like, oh, I'm a human. I'm alive. My heart is racing. I'm nervous. I'm excited. I'm scared. I've got all the feelings. Somewhere in there, we can come back into our own boots. Our horse might choose to stay then near us with that more regulated vibration. But and this is kind of an underlying thing now that I'm noticing about the things we're talking about today, that there's a way of masking
Yeah.
that is dangerous.
Yeah.
It is dangerous. And, whether that's masking within the field that you're in, doing what everyone's doing, even if it's abusive, whether that's masking the trouble that you're having in order to be willful and go forward and do the most and make the biggest difference, whether that's masking that in the moment you actually are excited and nervous and your heart is racing. For me, in those trainings, I never said out loud, yeah, but is that force necessary now, Jonathan? Right. I never burst through that. I would just kind of mask and know inside, I'm not doing it that hard later.
Right.
Right. But all this masking that we're doing is not serving us. It's not serving our health. It's not serving our relationships. It's not serving the horses. It's not serving the
Yeah.
industry. And so, if in fact we highly sensitive superhero types are here to make a difference, one of the strongest moves we can make is expose ourselves,
Yeah.
is unmasks ourselves as an invitation to people who love and trust us, that whoever and whatever they're feeling and being is actually who's invited to the party.
Yeah.
In fact, I find people's most authentic, strange, and wonderful selves deeply attractive.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
My God, it's so attractive. Like, once you get down to like a tender part of somebody, I'm all in. But as a sensitive, while we're in these highly masked states and masked arenas and masked cultures, I feel very confused and disillusioned, and I struggle. I struggle. The incongruency is like a cacophony. It's like having tambourines banging in my head. And
Yeah.
so it's really what we could do for ourselves. And I know if I feel that way, that's exactly how the horses feel with their highly sensitive bodies, that the incongruency and the misalignment, the masking and the lying that we're walking around with is literally making them crawl out of their skin.
Yeah.
And so if we love them so much and we want that connection, then we must be willing to do the inner work.
Yeah. Take
It's
those masks off. Yeah.
so worth it. Like the thing we want, that deep loving connection, the eye gazing, it's there. That's what's there for us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Whew, that is powerful stuff. Thank you. Wow. Yeah, my brain's kind of mush now. I was like, just feel like so moved by that way of bringing that together. And also I think just being with, gosh, how much we're taught to mask. Like this is something I know I was taught, at a very young age that this is the way you can survive in this world. This is the way that you need to do this to
Mhm.
be okay. I
Mhm.
remember when I started to unmask when I was 22 or 23. like when the tough guy mask started to come off.
Mm,
Interestingly enough, when Diva came into my life, it was such a pivotal
mm,
moment. You have those moments in life. That was like huge. And it was, I'm not going to swear, but God, was it hard and messy. I started equine therapy school at the same time. Diva came into my life, started equine therapy school, ended a long-term relationship, moved out on my own. I mean, it was all the things.
mm,
My teacher at equine therapy school, Dave Collins, he's one of those humans that, he's a angel walking around in a cowboy hat. And
mm,
I just love him. And
mm,
he's still like, I could call him up,
mm.
at 7 a.m. and be like, Dave, I have a question about a horse. What do you got, Alexa?
Oh,
And I just remember we actually drove through the town the school was at this weekend. I said to my partner, I hated this town because I came here every month for 3 days and I felt like absolute crap the whole time. I would have a migraine. I would just
mm,
would be like absolutely falling apart as I was being put back together again because the masking was coming off,
mm.
you know? And whew, I'm I know that you can attest to this and I can as well. This process of unmasking, gosh, it's hard, but it is so worth it. I'm so
Mhm,
grateful.
mhm. I'm
Did
so grateful. I feel like I'm just getting to know you in a time where I could just feel your authenticity. And I'm sure this was always inside of you, but it has a this feeling, this emerging feeling. And I know that it's coming through adversity and pain in the body and changes in the body temple as often it does.
as often it does.
And it reminded me, I was earmarking that we could talk about this later, but I'm just going to bring in this elder horse here before I know we got to get off here in a minute. But
Please do, Phil.
beautiful, a beautiful elder horse who is with us on like the second or third year that she was here. She started having the cystic problem emerging from her body. And these, it's reminding me of what you shared with me, but her cystic problem was more down in the hocks on the back legs and the back kind of elbow region. And they were just exploding out of her leg like popcorn, one after another. We couldn't treat them fast enough. And they call this kind of appearance quitter. Interesting. And they wanted to do the necrotic tissue thing where they put the maggots in the body and they let the maggots go in and eat out the tissue and clean out all that necrotic tissue. The owner was really struggling. Um, and by the time we were going to take her to get her treated, it had cleared on its own. Doesn't really make any sense. But what I'm pointing to is that you and I touched on earlier is that when there is enough safety
Yeah.
and when there is enough ground to stand on, some of the things the toxic elements we've been holding, carrying, maybe for generations. Only when there is enough safety can those things emerge. And so while it may look like the sickest you've ever been or the close to death, as we mentioned, and in this horse, they were considering putting her down. In fact, it was like a tipping point where this unmasking due to safety allowed this toxicity to move out uncannily in the leg, right? Like where the Chiron, arrow would have wounded in the leg. These wounded healer things are emerging from this horse's body, which heal themselves. They don't have any explanation for how that happened. Never had anything like that again. And so there's something to trusting these dark times when we are stabbed with these arrows that take us down and change us completely, and just to really embrace that maturity who respects the inherent paradox and knows that there must be good in it, even in the heat of it.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for speaking to that.
Mhm.
It's so important to remember. Yeah,
Mhm. I
because
feel like whatever's emerging with you is just beautiful. Yeah.
should have brought Kleenexes to this talk, everyone.
Thank you for doing your work, for being brave, and for sharing it with us so that we can remember, oh, right. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
all of it, right? We share these intimate conversations because we want there to be a place for other people to land too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Totally.
So
That's
thank you for having so many intimate conversations, for being such a superhero who stands up for the betterment of horses and doing it with your life, but not at the stake of your health, right? You're important to us.
yeah.
So
Thank you, Lori. Oh, such a pleasure.
we'll catch up soon.
We'll
And
catch up soon. Can you share just a little bit, Lori, before you go, how people might get in touch with you?
oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes. So you can find us on Instagram. I'm Wise Horse Woman, also on the web, wisehorsewoman.com. And then our program, Horse and Heart, is on the web, horseandheart.org. And on Instagram, I think it's Horse and Heart Ranch. And do keep an eye and track one of my best dear partners, Nika Ware, who does
Yes.
as the design company, Nadraws Nature. We are in the final phase of this. I feel like it's a national treasure. I'm not going to in any way try to underestimate it. It is spectacular. She did every single piece of hand drawn art for every single card. There was no AI. We started before AI went crazy. And so I feel like we have this sitting stack of treasures in the Oracle deck that we're making, that we're in a time when people were still just making art with their hands.
I love it. I
So
can't wait.
and that deck is also called Wise Horse Woman. So look for those and yeah, connect with us
Wonderful.
anytime. Yeah, we'd love to connect.
Beautiful.
Thanks, darling. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. And thanks for everybody for listening here today. It's a pleasure having you, and we'll see you next time for our next episode. Bye for now. Thanks for listening in today. I wanted to share about a brand new project that I hope you might be interested in. This is a new company, a new vision, and it's called Outside the Box Equine. And the very first offering of this new project is a brand new online course. And it is on something that many of you know is very near and dear to me, which is horsekeeping. And it is all about how to build a horse track system and specifically how to do so in a wet climate like here on the West Coast. My vision, my goal is to change how we keep horses on the West Coast, here in Canada and in the US, and start to shift into a space where horses are kept in ways that is species specific and really working for them, working for all. So head over to the new website, check it out. There's a few blog posts there already. It's outsidetheboxequine.com, and you can sign up to receive notice when the online course is ready for you to sign up. Okay, would love to hear your thoughts and hope that you sign up for the newsletter so you can get all the deets when it's ready.